Good afternoon. My name is Group Captain Sultan Mahmood Hali. I served in the Pakistan Air Force from 1970 till the year 2001, and I operated on the C-130 Hercules air transport aircraft. After my retirement, I took up journalism as a career and I studied broadcast journalism in the USA. During my tenure as an aircrew, my very first visit was to Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang province in China. This was in the year 1974. At that time, because of the 1965 and 1971 Pakistan-India wars, the United States had imposed an arms embargo on both India and Pakistan. It did not affect India because it was getting all its weapons from the USSR, but Pakistan was definitely affected because its main supplier was the United States. At that time, China, although it was very backward and its defense industry was in the rudimentary stage, it came to our aid and it started supplying us with weapons, whatever it had. And in that connection, we used to fly very regularly, especially to Urumqi, because that was adjacent to Pakistan, the closest to our air bases. And we used to fly regularly and get arms, ammunition, and aid and bring it to Pakistan. In 1974, in my very first visit, my impression of the Xinjiang province was that it was extremely backward and it needed a lot of development. Subsequent visits to Beijing and Shanghai showed a marked difference. Now, before I come to the question of Uyghurs and also the number of allegations that have been leveled, I would like to point out that the Uyghur uprising, which came about much later, I'll just touch upon it. The United States, especially its intelligence agency, CIA, bears some responsibility. You may recall that in 1979, the USSR invaded Afghanistan, and there was a likelihood that this invasion would have continued across Pakistan and Peter the Great's dream of reaching the warm waters of the Indian Ocean would have been materialized. CIA jumped into the fray to stop USSR in its tracks, and Pakistan became its frontline ally. But of course, the CIA invited Muslims from all over the world to come and get training in guerrilla warfare, join the Afghan Mujahideen, and stop the Soviet invasion from incurring any further. Now, the jihadists or the volunteers who came from all over the world, they also included Uyghur Muslims from China. And all these people, they were imparted with frontline guerrilla warfare tactics. They were armed with the latest weapons. They were provided funds. And I'll not be repeating history, but just to sum it up, that in 1989, the Soviets were forced to retreat. Now, here the Americans, they made a mistake. The mistake was that they should have de-radicalized these jihadists, these Muslims, and also taken back the weapons that they had supplied them. Instead, the CIA thought it was a job complete and they departed in a hurry, and the world had to pay the price, including the United States, because 911 is a direct result of that, because organizations, extremist organizations like the Al-Qaeda, they came into being, and they were, you see, trained in hard warfare, guerrilla warfare, and they were looking for enemies. Now, I'm not going to talk about the rest of the world, but as far as the Uyghurs were concerned, they returned to their homeland in Xinjiang. And at that time, now, while you see in 1986, Deng Xiaoping introduced his theory of economic openness, and China started developing economically very rapidly. But it was the eastern region that received the largest of the benefits, while the western region, mostly, I mean, Xinjiang is in that part, was extremely backward and there was disparity. Now, when these Uyghurs, they came back, they saw the disparity, and they also saw an opportunity, and organizations like the Eastern Turkish Islamic movement, ETIM, they came into being, and they thought that they should demand separation from mainland China. Now, most of these people, they were extremists. And also, as the world of the extremists goes, they tend to distort religion. They also tend to use verses of the Quran to their own advantage. And they tried to instigate the other Uyghurs to rise, and they committed acts of terrorism. And you may recall that in 2009, there was the mass uprising. After that, the central government in China, it took very drastic measures. It was a two-pronged action. First was that they cracked down on the extremists. They arrested them, they tried them, and those who were found guilty of indulging in separatism, extremism, and terrorism, they were punished accordingly. But on the same plane, the Chinese government, they decided that the causes of deprivation and you see the disparity between the eastern region and the western region must be brought to a balance, so that there is no cause for the Uyghurs to be upset, as well as to find causes for terrorism or uprising and things like that. So at that time, I flew in to China as an aircrew on at least 70 different occasions, mostly to Xinjiang, and I have toured Xinjiang up and down. When I retired in 2020 and became a journalist and later a writer and an academic, I authored, so far I've authored 5 books. My sixth one is on its way, which is coming up on the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. And I've been visiting China and mainly Xinjiang for research, for interviewing people. And I am an eyewitness to exactly what has been happening in Xinjiang. And I have seen the marked difference that was made over there. After the 2009 uprising, the Chinese government, they removed the squalid, camps and hutments and poor dwellings of the Uyghurs, and instead they erected high-rise apartments and asked the Uyghurs to move in over there. Of course, there was a catch here. What the Chinese did was that they also made a number of Han, the majority population of China, to move into Xinjiang and be neighbors of the Uyghurs, so that there could be better amalgamation, better understanding. Simultaneously, the development projects were introduced so that the Uyghurs, they would, not feel deprived, and they would give up the acts of terrorism and extremism and separatism. Unfortunately, some detractors of China, they thought that Xinjiang is the soft underbelly of China, and perhaps they were envious of the rapid rise, the rapid economic rise of China, and they may have instigated some of these Uyghurs, but I'll not go into that. But the fact is that the Chinese government, it analyzed what were the causes, and the main cause was, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the sense of deprivation, which was addressed by by installing development projects. But the other was the distortion of religion. And to cater for that, uh, there were institutions set up, and I have myself visited the Xinjiang Islamic Institute, which was established some 30 years ago. And I've met Abdul Rajab Tumniaz, who is the president of the institute. And I have seen with my own eyes that this institute is parallel to some of the finest universities of the United States of America, like Stanford or Berkeley and so on. It has fantastic facilities, but more importantly, it teaches imams, the religious leaders of especially Uyghurs, and other Muslims in China, the balanced theories of Islam, because Islam, by the way, is not an extremist religion. It doesn't teach extremism. But the extremists, they take away, they distort the verses of the Quran. For example, there is a verse which says that thou shalt approach the disbelievers and explain to them that they have to live in peace with you. In case they attack you and they are at war with you, then you are at liberty to kill them. So now what these uh, terror mongers do, they ignore the first part of the verse and say that, see, the Quran says that kill the disbelievers. Now, this is totally false and fake, and that is how they ensure that people are motivated towards extremism. So, what has been done in this Xinjiang Islamic Institute is that Islamic leaders have been created who are living a modern life. They play basketball and billiards and swim and football and so on. At the same time, they are being taught the balanced teachings of Islam. Once they get their bachelor's degree, they go out and serve as imams in the various mosques. Now, there have been a lot of allegations that Islam is being discouraged and the Uyghurs are stopped from practicing their rituals. I have found it totally incorrect. Yes, in 1974 and even in subsequent years till the 80s, I saw that the mosques there were in a dilapidated condition. But after that, the mosques there now are really modern. They are equipped with the best of facilities, and they have these religious leaders imbibed with a balanced teaching of Islam, giving sermons of love and peace and not hatred or extremism. So that has been working to some. The other aspect I saw was that Uyghur children, especially in the middle school age, from age of about 12 to 15, they have been encouraged and given scholarships and enrolled in special schools. We are living in the boarding areas because some of them belong to remote areas. They are being given the best of education. I've visited these, I've talked to these young men, and of course, there are girls also. And they are encouraged to learn about science and technology and also the option of three languages. One is their own mother tongue, which is the Uyghur language, and the second is Mandarin, and the third is an optional language. They can either take up Spanish or English or Arabic or whatever. And I've conversed with these young men. They are all thrilled to be there. They get a stipend of 2,000 RMBs per month, and every break they are given the opportunity to go and visit the homes. And after they graduate from middle school, if their grades are good, they are encouraged to get into higher education and given full scholarship. Now, these are fantastic plans and they are working. Later on, when President Xi Jinping came into power, that was in 2013, he installed the Belt and Road Initiative, which is exactly on the same route of the ancient Silk Road. And the major beneficiary of the Belt and Road Initiative is the province of Xinjiang, the Uyghur Autonomous Region. Fantastic facilities have been built. I've visited Kashgar. In fact, I've toured every inch of Xinjiang, and I have noticed that the facilities that have been created and the Uyghurs have been given the chance to get into higher position by providing them with vocational training and specialist training. And like in Kashgar, once upon a time when I visited it much earlier, it was like in the boondocks and neglected place. Although in the age of the Silk Route, it was one of the major trading posts. But now if you go there, you find seven-star hotels and fantastic factories and so on. And the Belt and Road Initiative, it meanders all the way, reaches Kashgar, and from there it fans into Central Asia and onwards into Europe. And on the other side, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC as it is called over here, which starts from the Pakistani port of Gwadar, goes on and meets the BRI at Kashgar and becomes a part of it. Now, the Belt and Road Initiative has really paid dividends. And my last visit to Xinjiang was in July 2019. And after that, I have obviously been deprived of any further visit owing to coronavirus, because I used to visit very regularly for the research of my books, as well as I was invited by various universities to carry out research and or rather deliver lectures and seminars and all. But I have seen that the Uyghurs there are living in prosperity and a far cry from the propaganda. What some of the Western reports have said about concentration camps or labor camps, they are in fact indoctrination centers. Those people who have been judged as having been misled or have gone astray from the teachings of Islam or from the teachings of normalcy, they are asked to enlist there. They are taught about the Chinese constitution, the Chinese law, and they are also given the opportunity to learn a vocational training. There is nothing of the so-called concentration camps and the allegation of rapes being carried out, of people living in squalid conditions. In fact, I found them extremely happy. I would like to mention here that I've also met a number of Pakistanis who have settled in Xinjiang province, who have married Uyghur women, they have children, and I've spoken to them and I've found them to be very satisfied people. Now, coming back to the Belt and Road Initiative, the United States has serious observations to it, but you see, the question arises that if 70 countries of the world have joined it, and especially the majority of Europe, what are the reservations of the United States? It says that there is lack of transparency, but this transparency can be taken care of if the United States sits on the board and see has a close look at what's going on. Now, you see, you cannot criticize things sitting from the outside, but you have to get into it. Now, there are propaganda and fake stories, and there are people like the born again Christian Adrian Zenz, who have been distorting the stories about the Uyghurs and talking about genocide. I have not seen a single instance of genocide, but on the contrary, if you visit the terrorism museum in Xinjiang, the capital city of Urumqi, you will see ample evidence of what the Uyghurs had done and how the Chinese government has overcome it. But you see, I expect a lot from the United States. As I mentioned, I studied in the USA, and two of my sons also graduated from US universities. And one of the most impressive things I found was when I entered the building of the Supreme Court, there are this frieze of 18 greatest lawgivers, and prominent among them are Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, the Prophet of Islam, as well as Confucius. And the founding fathers of the United States of America, they did not base the US Constitution or the US judiciary or the US law on a figment of their own imagination. They consulted all these great lawgivers and took the best out of them. So that means that some of the people who blame the USA of Islamophobia and all, they are not fully informed. Yes, in the near past, we saw during the Trump era, there have been instances of Islamophobia, but on the same, you see, it has been noticed that people like Pompeo and Trump, they had their own agenda, and they thought that confrontation is the best, you see, route to tackle China. Now, I would like to tell you, as a person who knows the United States very closely, has studied there, has studied its system, and has also studied China so closely, can tell you that, you see, China is misunderstood. Mostly it is being viewed from the point of view of ethnocentrism, in which, former imperialistic powers, they think that China is into hegemony. China is interested in occupying the rest of the world and so on. I don't believe in that, because I have studied the Chinese psyche, and one of my books, by the way, is Gleaming Gems of Chinese Culture. And Chinese culture, its traditions, its mores are more than 4,000 years old. And they are based upon, you see, very deep thought. And China does not want to occupy the world. Yes, it is interested in enhancing its own economic position. But in that, if you study the theories of President Xi Jinping, he wants that it should be a win-win situation. The Belt and Road Initiative or the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, they are both an extension of reaching out to the world to have mutual trade, to develop infrastructure so that the underdeveloped countries, they stand on their own feet, and the dividends are divided amongst China as well as the other. Obviously, China has an economic angle, but nowhere have I found any trace of any hegemonistic, you see, tendencies. Now, in my opinion, there is a great chance for the Biden administration to turn back some of the extremist actions which were taken by President Donald Trump. For example, delisting the ETIM from the list of terrorist organizations. Now, this will send a very wrong message, and people who have been suppressed, or rather the terrorism and extremism and separatism tendencies were suppressed, they will rise, and they may find their chance that we should become active again. So the fact remains that at the moment, the world is faced by extreme challenges. COVID-19 we have seen, and the biggest sufferer is the United States of America. Global warming, it is a reality. And recently I was watching this news report on the BBC, which was talking about forest fires in one of the coldest regions of the world, Siberia. What happened in Texas recently? There are the challenges of poverty, hunger, unemployment. Now, when President Xi Jinping had met President Obama, he had extended the olive branch and said that we must unite, we must pool our resources and try and pull the world out of these major challenges. And I think there is a great opportunity for George Biden to engage China and not go on a path of confrontation. If the US leadership is going to mimic what Pompeo was doing or was Trump was doing, it will be unfair. Now, you see, recently, or rather on the 22nd of February, the Chinese organized a very important international seminar in which 310 leaders and prominent personages representing more than 190 political parties and organizations from 80 plus countries, with over 100 from Islamic countries, were involved in an in-depth discussion, and the theme was a better life for all, and they reached a broad consensus. So my closing comments would be that please engage China and not confront it. I mean, utopian ideas like Indo-Pacific strategy, uh, why go into that route which could lead into conflict and which could lead into a nuclear conflict? Instead, we can pool resources, pull the world out of this morass, and have a better life for all. Thank you so much.